So here we are for yet another unboxing, and today we have the Timco Rally Spark XB6. Now my understanding here is that this is pretty much another generation of the Radix Buggy. It's got the same tires, wheels and tires, it's got the same body as the Radix, but Timco Rally have actually changed the name of the Buggy to the Spark XB6. It's a little bit confusing how Timco Rally keep changing the names of these cars, but they seem to do it with every kind of like generational change of the chassis, not so much of the body. So many years ago, someone told me that, you know, the body is kind of like what that defines the car. So if you put a Radix body on this, it's the Radix. But I think Timco Rally work it the other way. They go by the chassis. And once they've changed the chassis so much, it's no longer the original car, it's something else. And that's my understanding. I don't know for sure, but I think that's their thinking, because the body shape of this, I've actually put it next to the Radix and it's exactly the same. The wheels and tires are the same. So to me, this is a Radix, but it's just a better version of it because they've changed so much in the chassis. So this is available in 3 colors. You got the red, you got the blue, and you have the green, which is what I've got. I've got a bit of a green theme going on at the moment on the channel. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but a lot of cars that I've been getting have been green. Sometimes they are green, not by my own choice, but they just happen to be a green car. That's how they come. Other times, I tend to choose the color green, and I have a lot of green. It just seems to be the trend at the moment. So the car, as you know, comes fully assembled and ready to go. You have your transmitter over here, and then you've got some extra goodies in the bag. Stuff that you've seen before. We have some additional springs, which I think are a firmer spring. We have a lanyard, which is really cool. We also have an antenna tube, which you probably may not need to install on the car. And you also get an additional keyring. This is now my second keyring. And yeah, I've been using one for pretty much ever since I got it. I really like that keyring. So the other things you get in the little baggie here, you have an instruction manual for the ESC. So as always, the BEC on these ESCs comes set at, does it tell me? Or this one doesn't do it? Oh no, it is there. So no, option number 7, 6 volts. It comes set out of the factory. I will be changing that to 7.4. I've been doing that to pretty much all my Timco Rallies, and the standard servos seem to handle it just fine. I don't know why they don't come at 7.4 out of the box, but I do change all my BECs on these stock ESCs to 7.4 volts. Gives you a little bit more power and a little bit more speed out of the servo. And as I said, I've been using it now for quite some time without any problems. You have also an instruction manual for the radio. The radio itself is not too bad, but we'll talk about that in a sec. And then of course the usual instruction manual for Timco Rally, which is actually very comprehensive. Exploited views everywhere, part numbers for everything, basic instructions on how to you know, rebuild shocks, how to set up your car, what the radio does, parts list out the back, optional parts I think are available here as well. Some setting up options and things like that. So good bedtime reading. I know a lot of you do like to get into these manuals, so that's why I mention them every single time. And now we'll move on to the next section of the video. Starting things off with the radio, we have the CT2R radio, which has been around for a little while now. I think Timco Rally introduced this around the time that the Skeeter was released. I think it was about 2 years ago now. And it's been a pretty good solid radio. I really don't have too much to complain about here. Runs on 4 AA's, has a good feel on the wheel, trigger feels nicely weighted as well. Underneath the cover here, you have your reverse switches up the top, couple of LED lights to let you know when it's on and when your battery is running low. You've got a bind button in the middle. Steering trim, throttle trim, and steering dual rate knobs are all right there, ready to use. On and off switch over here, and that is pretty much it. Nothing really to write home about. It doesn't have any exceptional features, but it's not lacking in the basics for you to operate this this car. As far as I'm aware, these have been pretty good, so you should really have nothing to complain about here. And now for the car itself. Here it is. Actually a really nice scheme on these buggies. I like what Timco Rally have done here. The Spark XB6 is essentially a Radix. As I said, the body is the same, the wheels and tires are the same, but I think the reason why they've changed the name is because the chassis is dramatically changed. So it's no longer the same car. This is actually technically a different car, despite the fact that they're using the same mold for the body. So starting from the outside and working our way in, wheels and tires, as I said, same as the Radix. I actually don't mind these wheels and tires. I think they were a little bit nicer than perhaps the ones that came on the Python, for those of you who remember the Python. So these aren't too bad. They do work okay. The suspension on this guy is not too bad, actually feels pretty good. But if you notice here on the front, and I haven't touched this is how it's come out of the box, they've wound down these shock collars quite a bit to compress these springs to obviously keep the nose of the Buggy up. If they didn't do that, the car would sit a lot lower, which I guess gives this car a little bit of versatility, because yes, it is a basher Buggy, but for those of you who perhaps are near an actual 8-scale track, you could use these springs and kind of tune the car a little bit to go out there and have some fun on an 8-scale track, and you know, just have a bit of a muck around. I think the car is going to be too heavy to be competitive. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm also not an expert in the racing scene. But for just, you know, trying things out, I think the suspension will allow you to do that quite easily without any problems. Taking the body off here, the body is pretty standard. There's really nothing to write home about here. It does have a hole already pre-drilled for that antenna if you do want to install it. Underneath, there's no protective tapes or anything like that, so the body can rub on the chassis a little bit, and some of this paint can rub off. I would recommend maybe putting a little bit of tape on the inside, just lining the body a bit, just to make the paintwork last a little bit longer. There's no plastic pieces on top or anything like that, but there are kind of like these little bulging corners, which are kind of hard to see on camera because of the actual design of the graphics of it. But you can probably see just the corners just kind of stick up a little bit, and then you got this little spoiler back here, which is kind of cool, and then you got your body pins which is tethered onto the body, which is also pretty standard for a lot of basher cars out there and basher brands. So yeah, that's the body right there. So moving on to the chassis, the layout, you're probably very familiar if you've seen Timco Rally cars before. If you've had one before, there's really nothing here that's changed. You've got your servo up here on a bit of an angle. You've got your receiver box over here, the Torox 2050 kV 4074 brushless motor, 150 ampere AC with XT90 connectors and the capacitor pack tied onto the end. Battery tray, which is somewhat adjustable. You've got nice big straps on here. I still feel that the straps on these cars are not strong enough. I hope that Timco Rally will address that in the future. I also feel that they should come with 3 straps, not 2, because on more than one occasion I have now ripped these straps apart, and yeah, that's something that I think Timco Rally need to address, because it doesn't happen on any other RC that I've had, unless they're like really cheap ones. But on like some serious 8-scale, all the big name brands, none of these straps tend to break off. Timco Rally is the only one where that's happening. So I hope that they fix that in the future. But the battery tray is a little bit adjustable. It has this additional wall here that comes in so that you can put like standard 4S packs in there. But for those of us who want to run bigger batteries, you can remove this. There's 2 screws back here. You just take them out and you can put some slightly longer packs for those longer run times. As far as features go, you've got, of course, big bore aluminium shocks on the front. You've got a couple adjustments on the shock towers, but none on the A-arms. You have a beautiful chassis underneath, which is etched. And you know that's all going to get scratched up very soon as you start running it. You got beefy A-arms, front and rear sway bars pre-installed. You got nice beefy drive shafts on here, CVDs in the front, standard dog bones in the rear. You've also got spring steel all the way around on the outdrive cups, going through the center drive line and the outer drive line here on the front and rear. So all of these kind of like copper looking outdrives, they're actual spring steel, and they're super durable. Something that I think a lot of other manufacturers can take note of, because these have been one of the more durable things that Timco Rally have changed on their vehicles. Originally they were not like that. That was an option that you could upgrade your cars with, but they've eventually changed them out, and now they come standard on all their cars. So what makes this car a little bit different to everything else? Well, of course, as you can see here, we've got this brace that runs from front to rear, and it's actually a pretty clever design, to be honest, because it kind of ties, you know, it acts as a tower-to-tower brace, but it kind of sits at a very low, I guess, a very low point in the chassis. It doesn't stick up as high as like the big monster trucks. In order to achieve that, obviously because of the buggy body, you got to stay relatively low. I think they've done a pretty decent job. The only concern I have here is that I have seen a running video where the car was being bashed around. It, you know, it took a few hits, and I can't remember if it was the front or the rear, but in that video somebody actually bent these plates, these two, one of these I think would have been the longer one, which was a little bit odd, because then technically not supposed to do that, but they did. Now, of course, I think I've already seen some aftermarket versions of this in 70, 75, and they're a little bit beefier and everything. So you can, you know, if you're going to bash this thing super hard and you're going to take some hits, there might be a good option to do. The other thing that's changed compared to the original Buggy is the front and a little bit of the center here and the rear have all been completely redesigned. And as you can see, they look a lot cleaner. They look a lot stronger as well in the center there and in the rear. Team Corelli have done an absolutely fantastic job here. I think this is actually a really clean look. It looks a lot more better engineered than the original design. So I'm really looking forward to testing this out and just seeing how it performs overall. I don't think it's going to really change the handling of the car all that much. I think this is more to do with simplicity of working on the vehicle and durability. I think that's what it really comes down to. That's my opinion. I mean, I don't know, maybe you guys have, you know, I know that I'm a little bit late to the game here in getting this car, so maybe some of you who have been using this can tell me, you know, what's your experience been with this new redesign that they've done here. But aside from that, you know, you got your standard 5mm shock towers front and rear. We've got the nice flexible spoiler on the back. Although I will say this is another thing that I think Team Corelli need to address at some point, because these constantly break, and they don't break like they don't snap off. They just crack at certain points. They just break. I think pretty much every spoiler I have on every Team Corelli vehicle that I own currently has a crack in it or a breakage. But you know, they don't like break off completely. One thing I will say though, you know, despite the fact that the spoiler does break and crack, the spoiler mount, I haven't really gone through too many of those. I think I've had one fail, but the new one that I bought was already like changed from the original design. So, you know, they're constantly changing and upgrading and improving their designs to make them stronger and better, which is obviously a good thing, right? We can't really complain about that. It's great to see a company that, you know, watches what the you know, the community is doing with these cars, what type of content people are making with these vehicles, how they're driving them, how they're treating them, and you know, Team Corelli are addressing some of these little weak points and redesigning some of these components. I think the Spark, you know, also known as the Radix, is actually a really nice looking buggy. I've always liked this body design personally. The antenna, as you can see, is sticking out here. You can put the tube in, although I've always found that the hole for the tube is too big for the tube itself. So what I tend to do is I'll just push the antenna down and I'll just leave it like this. That's really all you need to do. Just, it's out of the way, you know, the body goes on, it doesn't interfere with anything. You don't have to have it sticking out of the body either. So it just goes in there like that, and happy days, this thing's ready to rock and roll. So yeah, that's the Spark XB6. Now we're going to kick off the wish list with something that I've forgotten to mention pretty much ever since I started doing Team Corelli unboxings. And that is the wheel nuts. These wheel nuts are not serrated, and they should be. Now I know that Team Corelli watch a lot of my videos, and I'm hoping that they watch this one as well. Can we please have serrated wheel nuts? A lot of the other manufacturers do it, and it helps prevent wheels from coming off when you're running your car. I myself have had a couple of them fall off during my runs, and I've got that on video as well. And you know, we're so many generations in now, Team Corelli have been in this game for long enough where this should be a standard thing. I don't know why they haven't done it, Maybe it's something that's kind of like at the bottom of the pile of their to-do list, but I think that needs to come up a little bit, because it's quite annoying when you're running your car, even though you've tightened all the wheel nuts and everything, with all the tumbles and the heat expansion and plastics getting a little soft or whatever, the wheel nut just undoes itself, and then before you know it, you've got a wheel running away from you and you have to go after it. So please, serrated wheel nuts would be great. The next thing is some better battery straps. Now, I know you guys have probably seen it in my videos as well, where I've broken a couple of battery straps, and there's a couple of things, right? So number one is I think that these straps are a little bit weak in general. Also, they only give us 2 when there's a provision for 3, and I think 3 would be better, or perhaps even introduce one that goes long ways as well, which other manufacturers do in some of their vehicles. So that could be something that could be implemented here as well if they wanted to do that. Or just improve the quality of these 2 straps that are included. Now, I know Tim Corelli have upgraded ones, which are pretty heavy duty. I've actually got a couple of them myself that I purchased and put in some of my other cars. And you know, they're really heavy duty, like they're pretty hardcore straps. I don't know if we need to go to that extreme, but just something that's a little bit better quality I think would be nice here. Or as I said, at the very least, include a 3rd one, just to stop these things from ripping apart on nasty crashes. The other thing is an antenna tube that actually fits the antenna slot they allow for this. So if I put my tube here, this is the tube that's come in the car, and you can see it doesn't stay in there, it just comes off really easy. I think the mold for this is too big, or the antenna tube that they provide is just too narrow, too small, too thin, however you want to word it. It just doesn't fit in there, so you end up either just having the antenna like that, or coming up with your own antenna tube. Tape inside the body is the next one on my list. As I said, there's no tape in here. I have mentioned this to Tim Corelli in the past, and hopefully they'll do something about it at some point, but you know, we're so many generations in and we still don't have tape inside the bodies. It would be nice to have that, just to, well, you know, on the rubbing points of the chassis and stuff, just so that the paintwork doesn't rub off. And the last thing is, of course, a better wing. Now, as I said, the wings themselves, they don't snap off. Like, I'm not missing pieces of the wing. They just crack where they joint up in, you know, in the verticals and the horizontal points and stuff like that. They just break. And it's, again, it's the only manufacturer that I've tested where the wings break like that. So they need to update that material. The plastic compound that they're using on these wings needs to be changed somewhat, so that yes, they can flex. We want them to flex, but we don't want them to tear and rip apart the way that they're doing. So I've gone through a couple of wings myself in some of these Tim Corelli cars. So it would be nice to see them making improvements on that wing there. And that's going to wrap it up for yet another unboxing. Now, a big shout out again for Tim Corelli for sending this out for review. Always appreciate them supporting the channel, and I hope I did this unboxing justice. I may have missed out on a couple of things, so for those of you who want to do a little bit more reading and a bit more research on this car, I'll have links in the video description for you guys to check out on the Tim Corelli website, and you can find out all the information, all the changes and upgrades that they've done on this buggy in far more detail. But for now, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button before you go. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll be speaking to you all next time.